What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with a loose graded vintage Star Wars market update. And I think it's only 3 sellers that we're going to cover in this video. And it was kind of a rough weekend for me because I bid on a number of items and I finished second on pretty much everything except for one where I bid kind of fair market value in my mind. And I actually won that one, but everything else I finished second. And there were some absolute gems, UKG and AFA graded examples. And wow, I wish I could have won a couple of these, but I overbid on a couple and I still lost, but that's the way it goes sometimes when you're bidding on eBay. And I think that it's safe to say that Ahsoka or some other factor has definitely kept prices up. And while a lot of these were very rare figures, as you can see here, in general, the market seems to be bouncing off of the lows a little bit, and high grade and rarity still wins no matter what, but the prices even then I think went above and beyond what I expected. So let's take a look. The first one is just a solid dome R2-D2 Hong Kong UKG 85% new case style. So standard first 12 R2-D2, but beautiful condition. It sold for 240 pounds, which is about 293 US dollars plus shipping, and that looks every bit of an 85 to me. It looks to be in really clean shape. The same seller, Keschel Retro Trader, who I bought from in the past, and this auction lot was incredible, but he had a UKG 70% Spanish POC R2-D2. Not particularly expensive, but in general, they're hard to find. They just don't pop up that much. And again, it was only a 70 grade. You can see obvious wear to the dome and to the sticker, but you know, I've seen maybe 2 or 3 of these over the last year or so pop up. And it's just one of the lesser known or harder to find variants, and very tough to find in very clean condition. 70% is about the best I've ever seen in terms of grade. That one sold for 109 pounds, which is 133 US dollars, a very fair price just given what it was. Here was a Spanish PvP Darth Vader leather cape. So this had the textured leather cape, which we've covered in a recent video in my collection, but it was graded UKG 90%, so very high grade, beautiful condition. The paint apps on the chest apparatus were pretty flawless versus mine, as you guys saw in my recent pickups video. It doesn't have quite that vivid of a color, but you can see the very obvious texture to the cape. Here's another close-up of the cape, if I can get it to pop up. Yeah, here we go. So you can see very clearly there, it's got a texture to the Spanish PvP Darth Vader. There's also a smooth cape PvP Darth Vader, but this one was a UKG 90%, and it sold for a big price, 300 pounds, which is 366 US dollars. Now, it's interesting because the seller had 2 different no COO 1977 date stamp R5D4s. One of them was a UKG 85 and one of them was a UKG 90%. But I was curious as to see how the price would compare because they were closing the exact same time, and there really wasn't that much of a difference in price. Again, this one was the 1977 date stamp, and what does that mean? That just means in the factory they were using the R2-D2 body, which is pretty much exactly the same for this R5D4, which that body type has a 1978 date stamp. So, it's just kind of a common thing where they just mixed and matched as they would. But this is the harder to find no COO that would appear on Tri-Logos or Palitoy cards. That one sold for 248 pounds, which is 302 US dollars. And then they also had, as I said, a 90% gold, and that one sold for 265 pounds, which is 323 US dollars. So not a significant jump in price, which was a little bit of a surprise to me. I would expect this one to go for more or the other one to go for less, but it was only about $20 difference going from a UKG 85 to a 90%. Both of them were 1977 date stamp, no COOs, but beautiful figures on those. Next up, here's one I did bid on. This was a harder to find blank raised bar China Leia Bespin. I've just had a hard time trying to locate this one. I've got 4 other variants in my collection, but when I saw this one pop up, I was like, I'm going to make a go for it. And I put in what I thought was a very competitive bid. And I think I bid 185 pounds. Well, I lost. I finished in second place, which was 190 pounds or 232 US dollars. But, the China raised bar Leia Bespins, those would appear on like US Kenner cards for the Return of the Jedi line, like 77 backs, things like that. That's when Kenner started going over to China for a lot of the manufacturing, to my knowledge. I don't think that any of the ESBs have China COOs, but anyway, it was graded 85% for the figure. Paint got an 80, which it did. It had a couple of nicks on the hand there, as you can see. And then the cape got an 85 for an overall 85. A little bit of eyebrow wear. So I didn't want to overbid too much because it was at that, it was kind of at the upper end of my comfort level for what I consider to be an 85. But still, a beautiful figure and a very hard to find COO for some reason. You just don't find loose graded Leia Bespins with the China country of origin very often. So I did my best, but I did lose that one. I didn't overbid on it, but I did bid on it, and I finished second. Here was a beautiful Taiwan Boba Fett with the V5 blaster. That was a UKG 90%. That one sold for a big number, 410 pounds, which is $500 US. It looks to be every bit of a 90 grade to me. I mean, the paint is pretty much flawless on that one. And, it had the correct blaster according to the listing. And he even included some of the Imperial gunnery information there. So beautiful figure. And I wasn't bidding on this one, but I was curious to see what it would sell for. But about $500 US took that home. Here was a Lily Letty Boba Fett. So this one was a stunner. And it was a no COO Scar variant. Now, in the description, he labels this one as the single Scar variant, but it's actually the double Scar variant. So if you look at the legs here, you can see very clearly that it's got the scar at the upper portion of the calf as well as at the lower portion of the calf, to my knowledge. This is my understanding of it. So there is one that does not have a scar down here, and maybe that's it. But to me, it looks like it's the double Scar variation there. You can see very clearly where it's been scarred out, both at the top as well as the bottom of that calf. So I think this is this double Scar variation for the Letty Boba Fett. And again, it was a UKG 80%. That one sold for 421 pounds, which is $514 US. I thought that was a very fair price. Here's the other one I bid on. This was a tough to find French Meccano Boba Fett. So these are the true tri-logos that appeared on these French tri-logos with the smaller blister type. Very tough to find this one. It does have a scar on the back of the leg, as you can see right here. It's a big kind of blotchy, kind of rectangular, smooth scar. It's a very smooth COO versus the Spanish PBP, which obviously is known for the light uniform, as well as a much deeper, kind of more noticeable scar. Large copyright on the other leg. So I bid pretty high on this one. I went aggressively on it. I bid 510, and I lost again. So it sold for 520 pounds. So that's number two off the top of my head that I bid on that I lost. So this one sold for $635, which I actually thought was a pretty fair deal. There was an AFA 85 that sold last year for about $770. And so I was thinking, okay, well, the market's a little softer. It's a UKG 85 versus an AFA 85. So I was thinking like 600 to 650 was about right. And I was pretty close, but I just finished second place on that one. I would have liked to have gotten that one, though, because it's just, you don't see this one very often, whether it's UKG graded or AFA graded. Certainly AFA graded examples come up very irregularly, once every blue moon. Occasionally you see them UKG graded, but even this one, I don't remember a UKG 85% any time in the last 2 or 3 years that has popped up for this French Meccano no COO. So tougher to find variant. It's kind of like, it looks the same to me really as a Hong Kong variation. There's not much difference, at first blush. You really have to look at the back of the leg. So it's not as exciting of a variant versus like the Spanish PBP, but it's harder to find, and that's why I bid on it. But I did finish second again on that one, but that's okay. It was a nice figure. Congrats whoever won that. Very rare Spanish POC Boba Fett graded UKG 75%. And they always go for about $1,000 or more ungraded. I've seen them sell for quite a bit higher than that ungraded. So I was curious to see what this sold for. And I did double check against Javier Ruy Lopez's guidebook to make sure that this COO, as labeled on the back of the leg, versus what it says, which is a Spanish POC, was correct. And it is. It is the Spanish POC. You can see very clearly it's got kind of the sloppy paint applications that Spanish POCs are known for. Very, very difficult to find this one. This is the first time I've actually ever seen a graded example on eBay before, to my knowledge. I mean, I don't remember any other examples. So very, very rare. This one sold for 1,070 pounds, which is $1,300 US. And again, I think that's very fair for what it was, given that in like Echo-based vintage variants and some of those other kind of variant groups on Facebook, ungraded, they can sell for this price or more. So very interesting sale there. Here was the Spanish PBP Tri-Logo. So this has got the light blue uniform with the bright green chest armor. This one is the unpainted knee, unpainted unpainted arrow right here, or unpainted kind of gauntlet. And that's the most common for the Spanish PBP. It was an UKG 85%. There is one that comes with a painted gauntlet as well as the painted knee. There's also different colors for the belts, but this one is the most common one, and it sold for 371 pounds, which is $452 US, a very fair price. That's a price I would have been willing to pay for all day long. I didn't bid on it, though, because there was an AFA graded 80 example that I'll show you that was ending later this evening. So I passed on this one to go after the AFA graded example to kind of match my other AFA Boba Fett's, but I was not successful on that one either. But keep this number in mind. Again, it sold for $450 for a UKG 85%, and you can compare what the AFA 80 example sold for. That was the exact same figure: unpainted knee, unpainted gauntlet, unpainted wrist rocket there. So anyway, that one did sell $450. Here was a Spanish Puck Yoda. This was the Apple head. Now, if you remember in my last loose graded video, there was a UKG 85% that sold from a different seller that sold for over $1,250. But I was speaking with my good friend Dustin B., who is a Yoda expert, and he said that this UKG 80% Applehead Spanish Puck Yoda had the incorrect accessories. It had Cater accessories, but the Apple-headed Spanish Puck Yoda had Unitoys accessories. So this one did have the incorrect accessories, according to my buddy and Yoda expert Dustin. So I did not bid on this one, and this one sold for 465 pounds, which is $568 US. So I stayed away from this one because of the incorrect accessories, but maybe the market knew that too, given that a UKG 85% sold for $1,250 US, and the UKG 80%, only one leg down in terms of grade, sold for, you know, less than half that number. So maybe the market was wise to that fact as well, that it had the incorrect accessories for it. But take that for what you will. But I tend to trust Dustin pretty hard when it comes to Yodas, because he knows everything there is to know about Yodas, and he said they were absolutely the wrong accessories. So just keep that in mind if you bid on any of these Spanish Puck Yodas, and double check the accessories versus Imperial Gunnery, because they should have Unitoys accessories instead of Cater factory accessories. Next up, very rare PBP 4-LOM with the red armor. It's got a red tint to the armor instead of the dark brown color. This one was graded UKG 80%. One thing to keep in mind on these is that the back of the robe can be torn. This one did have cracks by the neck. In almost every single example that I've seen for a Spanish PBP red armor 4-LOM, they almost always have that crack. I don't know why that is, but that's just the case with this Spanish example, is that robe does not hold up very well. So always double check that. But it was graded UKG 80%. This one just had a crack to the robe. It didn't have a full tear. Usually you see full tears. This one sold for 270 pounds, which is $330 US, a very fair price. I've got a CAS 85 plus, and I paid more than this price for it for when I bought it ungraded, but it got the 85 plus for it. I think I paid $450 for mine, if memory serves. So that one sold again for $330 US. A couple of beautiful Spanish Dengars sold. Here was a Spanish Puck, so the early Spanish figure. It was a UKG 75%. Pretty generous grading. You can see some modeling on the head there. That's, and you know, or paint overspray, something going on there. Lots of chipping to the shoulders and to the chest armor. They got a 75. I would say that this is probably a little bit overgraded in my opinion, but it still sold for pretty good money, 140 pounds, which is $170 US. And here was the one I did bid on, and again, I finished second. I didn't overbid on this one because I do have a UKG 80%, although it's a different COO. As you can see on the label for this one is a made-in Scar. And you have to bear with me because eBay is not cooperating with me right now. But it is a different COO. It says no COO, and in parentheses, made in. And it was UKG 85%. And I double checked it versus the Spanish guide, and there's apparently 4 or 5 different COO variations for this particular paleface purple armor Dengar. And so I thought it'd be kind of fun to pair this one with mine, mine is just a straight Scar. There's no made in on the leg for mine, so it would have been kind of a slightly different variation and also a higher grade. I finished second on this one. I think I bid 91 or 92 pounds. So this one sold for 93 pounds, which is 113 US dollars. But for me, it would have been another $47 shipping. So I went as high as I was comfortable with for a fairly common, Spanish figure. It's not very hard to find this one. So maybe I'll pick it up at some later date. But that is number 3 that I bid on, where I finished second. Next up, we're going to dig into some AFA graded examples that were sold by CIB on eBay. So CIB is Collectibles Investments Brokerage. They've got beautiful figures this go around. This one was a Vinyl Cape Jawa graded AFA 80 plus, and it sold for $28.50, which I thought was a very fair price just given what it was. I sold my AFA 85 example for $3,300. It had the older case style. This one was a slightly lower grade with the new case style for $28.50 plus shipping plus taxes. So it would have been it would have been over $3,000 for me to bid on this one. So I think I gave the buyer of my example a very fair price just given what this one sold for. Next up was a baggie for Luke Skywalker Farm Boy. This was a Taiwan baggie AFA 80. That one sold for $455, which I thought was a really good buy. This one sold after everything else I bid on, so I didn't bid on it, but a very nice example. CIB also had a double telescoping Luke Skywalker graded AFA 75 plus. I was surprised by this sales price. It sold for $14.79. We just documented an AFA 75 example that sold for, I believe, under $1,200. And so I was a little surprised this one went as high as it did, but it is CIB. They ship worldwide, and foreign buyers are more comfortable buying from CIB on eBay because they know they're going to get their item. They know it's a trusted brand. So CIB items tend to sell for higher prices, as I'll show you here shortly. But if you remember, well, I'm not to that one yet, but we'll get to it in a second. But here is a Lily Letty R2-D2 Type B sticker graded AFA 70. I almost bid on this one, but I decided not to. It sold for $202.50, which I thought was a very fair price. It's almost impossible to find a Lily Letty R2-D2 graded higher than this because the sticker always yellows. So this one was a Type B sticker, dark blue dome, and I thought that was worth every bit of $202.50 plus shipping. Here was a light green chest armor Hong Kong figure. So AFA over the last couple of years has started denoting the Hong Kong Boba Fett, or they label it light green chest. So there are 2 different variations for the Hong Kong that they will note on the label, just straight Hong Kong or light green chest. So this one has the letter green chest color. It's a very faint difference. I can barely tell the difference, to be honest with you. That one sold for $267. It was an AFA 85 example. And then here is that other item that I bid on. Now, if you remember, the UKG 85% sold for $450. This one was an AFA 80 example, and it was the same figure, unpainted knee, unpainted wrist dart, and AFA labels it 1983 because that's when the PBP factory merged with the POC factory, and PBP started manufacturing and assembling and painting their own figures instead of importing Hong Kong parts like they did for the Spanish POC figures. So I overbid on this one because I thought it would be cool to have another AFA graded variant for my collection. All my other Fets are AFA graded. So I bid $630, I think, or somewhere in that ballpark, and I finished second again. This one sold for $640. So that was as high as I was willing to go. I was willing to pay a slight premium versus a UKG graded example, but I lost on that one. So I think that's number 4 from this batch where I finished second. Next up was the PBP Han Solo Hoth. This one was the pink face variation. I wasn't planning on bidding on this one, but after I lost the PBP Fett, I did bid on this one. It was a half-hearted bid, but again, I finished second on this one. This one sold for $203.50. So this is number 5, I believe, where I finished second on Sunday. So it was a nice example, but a fairly common figure. It might have been slightly overgraded. It was graded AFA 80, but you can see some very obvious wear to the tips of his toes there. One little nick on his hand there, but overall a clean example. It had some wear to the face as well. So there's also a Spanish PBP Han Hoth with the purple jacket and pale face. That's the more desirable variant and goes for a little bit more money, $300 to $400, somewhere in that ballpark. But this pink face is the other one. But I half-heartedly bid it, but I still finished second on that one. Here is the one I really wanted. This is the Spanish PBP Luke Hoth with the pale face and the light brown kind of vest, and it's labeled as light brown torso scar COO. Again, Spanish PBP Luke Hoth. These very rarely come up, and they almost never come up AFA graded. I see them fairly occasionally UKG graded, but not AFA graded. They just don't come up very often. So I bid aggressively on this one. I bid 601 and I lost again. So this one sold for $611, and I thought that was an overbid, quite honestly. I think it's worth $300 to $400 really. I bet if a UKG 80 example comes up, it sells for less than $300 on eBay. But this one did sell for 611, and you know, I was kind of upset I lost it, but it is what it is, you know. So that was number 6 that I lost and finished second on. Here was the one I did win though. So I did win one, and I half-heartedly bid on this one because a UKG 80 example sold for about $400 to $450 earlier this year. Well, this was an AFA 80 example of the Spanish Puck Sand People. And so they label them all Kenner/PBP. I don't know why they do that. It really should be Kenner/Puck on that one. But they do correctly label it as a 1981 because that's when the Spanish Puck factory opened up. This one was an archival case, dark brown bandolier, and again, it's a Hong Kong COO because they imported the parts to the Spanish Puck factory, assembled and painted them in Spain. So all the figures have a Hong Kong COO. So again, I bid like $450 on it, and I ended up winning it at $449. So I barely won it, but that one should be here by the time that this video airs. So I'm sure I'll do a video on this and some of my other recent pickups here soon. But I'm glad I won it. It was a nice example, and it was on my short list of Spanish figures that I wanted to pick up. This one, the Spanish Paleface Luke Hoth and the Spanish Paleface Han Hoth are kind of on my want lists, and I actually had this one on my want list for next year. Yes, I've already made my want list for next year, so I get to scratch this one off because I did pick it up. So it was an AFA 80. I paid $449 for that one. And that was it. I just thought it was an interesting batch. I finished second place on 6 different figures, and I would not have bid on all 6 figures because I don't have the money for all 6 figures, but I kept losing, so I kept bidding, and I kept losing until I finally won on the very last figure that I was interested in. So that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. You just never know how bidding is going to go, but very happy to get one of them. But there were some beauties out there, and it just was not meant to be, Shelly, for a lot of those really desirable figures. I think the ones I'm most upset about are the French Meccano Boba Fett, the AFA 80 Boba Fett PBP, and then the AFA 80 Hoth Luke Skywalker PBP. So those are the ones I really wanted, but it didn't happen, and that's the way it goes. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll be back soon.